Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. My name is Michelle Lorenz, and I'm really privileged and honored to be here tonight with you to introduce you to this amazing team. If you haven't heard of the company yet, it is an ALS customized care model delivered to you by Sandra Abravaya, who is the CEO of Synapticure, her husband, Brian Wallach, and they came up with Synapticure to help address some of the gaps in care that they discovered when Brian was diagnosed with ALS. And then you have some new members of the Synapticure team that are going to join you tonight. We have the two neurologists that are part of the team. So Eric Anderson and Danielle. So I call them Eric and Danielle. They're amazing. Had several conversations with them. You're going to be blown away, not only with their clinical expertise, but the way they deliver compassion in their care services. And then we didn't plan this part, but I have to rave a little bit about Erin, who is one of the care coordinators. And for those of you who have not worked with anybody at Synapticure yet, everybody in the community shares things publicly with me, kind of a no filter kind of share. And I have to tell you that the comments we've heard about the care coordinators at Synapticure, and Erin, you're the leading one there, everybody raves about having somebody to hold their hand and walk through this journey with them. And I think that's the biggest blessing that we can bring to anybody in this community. So I am honored to be here with you tonight. I'm just going to be kind of the MC, passing the mic from one to another. I'm going to mute myself and let the really important people share the news with you about what Synapticure is doing to bring a different model of care to the whole entire ALS community, and then some. They'll share that story with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle, for hosting us. Thank you to everybody for logging on a Thursday night on the 1st of December. I'm hoping this is a cozy night for everybody. You're somewhere warm and comfortable. We have a lot of good stuff to share. First, let me introduce myself. Michelle mentioned, my name is Sandra Abravaya. I'm the CEO of Synapticure. I'm also Brian Wallach's wife, and Brian and I have now been on this journey for 5 years since he was diagnosed in 2017. And in the course of this journey, we've done many things to try to address all the challenges in the ALS sector from multiple angles. And one of the accomplishments or bodies of work Brian and I are obviously so proud of, and we speak about this extensively, is everything that we've done as part of IAMALS, which we are co-founders of. Now, a couple years ago, Brian and I, while continuing to have the team at IAMALS run the ship there, decided that there was a real need that we were both personally aware of and that we were aware of through all the families that were connected to in the ALS community for additional medical care, additional support with all of the pain points in navigating your medical care and journey with this disease. And so Brian and I came up with a lot of ideas. Brian came up with many of them. I was hesitant to embark on several because they all seemed like really good ideas, but a lot of work. But I am very grateful that ultimately we took those ideas, we recruited this amazing team that you'll hear from tonight, and we decided to launch Synapticure. We began with some pilots about a year ago with small cohorts of families and sort of piloting and iterating and trying out some services. Now, we fully launched the company in February, and that is when we launched publicly with a New York Times story about what we intended to do with this care service and what the sort of overarching vision is for this work. We have been very, very excited and gratified to be able to be in service to so many families with this medical practice, and are eager to support even more families. And so the thing I wanted to kick us off with today was painting a little bit of that longer term vision for Synapticure and giving everybody a sense of where we hope the work ultimately goes. And so, Eric, if you're able to share a slide, that would be amazing. Great. So for several of you who are perhaps already familiar with Synapticure, today Synapticure is known for what we're focused on, right? Synapticure Care. We are working to create the very best medical care that we can through a virtual model. And we think, both through our own experience and through families that we're surrounded by, that there is a lot of ALS care that can happen virtually, and it can be done so in partnership with your existing doctor. And so that's really, really important. Synapticure is not the solution to medical care independent of your in-person doctor. We work in partnership, whether that is a local neurologist, even a local PCP, and in many instances, a local ALS clinic, and in some instances, an ALS clinic that is not so local, but that you are able to take a flight to see on that 3 to 4 month cadence that we know people undertake, and Brian and I ourselves do that. So we are a virtual patient care platform here to partner with your existing care team to make sure that as a collective, we wrap ourselves around you and your families and get you all the help and support you need. Now, the parts of Synapticure that we haven't spent as much time sharing about and talking about are Synapticure data and Synapticure personalized treatments. Now, one thing that I think every ALS family can attest to is how low the success rate is for clinical trials. I know this is maddening for all of us, desperately and anxiously waiting for therapies to make it through the pipeline and the process of FDA approval. And for many of you, you realize that if we had, as an ALS sector, even more robust data, we would be better positioned to support those who are enrolling clinical trials to do so in more sophisticated manners so that they could subgroup the patients that they enroll and potentially set up the clinical trial for success more readily. And so that is a key goal of what we hope to do with Synapticure data. Another key goal, which again is a pain point that every ALS family I know experiences, is just the therapy access. We know that today, if a patient has a subtype of ALS, whether it's a genetic mutation or a neurofilament light level, there's not enough information across the country to help us understand who else has that genetic subtype, who else has that level of neurofilament light readout. And so when we have comprehensive, smart data, we are able to really, really accelerate the drug development and approval process. And even importantly, perhaps sometime in the near future, have a version of clinical trials where there's no placebo group. Wouldn't that be a dream? So there's so much that's within our reach if we are able to bring together this data in a comprehensive, thoughtful way. Now, very, very importantly, the data that we bring together at Synapticure, we speak with patients clearly about the uses of data, and what is really important to Brian and I as co-founders of the company is that the data that we collect is shared back with patients, because we want families to feel the immediate value of that data. We ourselves have been asked to participate in research projects and programs where we might give our data and we appreciate the longer tail value of it, but we've always wondered, why can't we see our neurofilament light levels? I would like to know what that is, because I appreciate that that's a secondary endpoint or an exploratory endpoint for a clinical trial. So I want to see my data as a family with living with ALS. And at Synapticure, we're very, very focused on making sure that the data we bring together immediately gets shared back with patients and informs their care in a personalized way. The last component is Synapticure personalized treatments. I think everybody in the ALS community is also keenly aware that mouse models are not accurate and useful read of efficacy of ALS therapies, and the modeling programs that we have currently for ALS are really undermining our success rate in the clinical trial sector. And so at Synapticure, we are piloting some initiatives that allow us to utilize modeling of individual cells that will hopefully ultimately be a way in which to test therapies quickly and more accurately. So Synapticure is never going to be in the business of therapy development. What we do hope to be is in the business of supporting the acceleration of therapy development, and as part of that, helping to develop models and ways in which therapies can be tested more quickly and more accurately. And then, of course, again, just like with Synapticure data, it's really, really important to Brian and I that that information and those personalized testing models inform care immediately. We want, again, to give that back to patients immediately. We hope that these models can allow us to inform and personalize care in the near term. And so that this is not just some research project. This is about how all of this work is both helping the sector get better and faster at developing therapies and is providing immediate care value to families. And so that's how this virtuous cycle goes from what we hope to create, which is the best virtual care platform, medical practice of physicians and nurses providing care at Synapticure, into a collection of sophisticated, thoughtful data that we collaborate on with the nonprofit and the biopharma industry to come together to help accelerate the development of therapies for ALS families. And then the third component of this cycle is to create a way, a more effective and efficient way to test therapies to then again inform personalized care for individuals. So that is the full vision of Synapticure: care to cures and back to care. So really excited that we were able to share some of this. We have a lot of different components of the presentation and discussion tonight. So I don't want to take too much more time on it, but I do want to open it up for any questions that are in the chat before I turn it over to my colleagues.
Looks like so far we don't have any questions, just a lot of people telling us where they're from. So if you have any questions for Sandra about Synapticure's mission or any of these three, type them in the chat box. I have a question for you that we can just fill the gap with in case anybody's asking a question right now. So when you talk about using the data, let's use an example of genomic data. So if you got data back that said somebody had that new mutation that was discovered, UNC13A, like how does that play into what Synapticure would do with that and your vision for treatments that come from that?
Brian, I know you're very enthusiastic about UNC13A. I'm going to let you take the mic on this.
First of all, let me introduce Winona, who has the misfortune of spending every day with me. And number two, let me use a real life example. So when I was diagnosed, we did genetic testing. And I carried the
TBK1.
Thank you. And we knew that there were two companies that were working on a TBK1 treatment. So we reached out to them. And we said, will you plan to move do you plan to move the treatment forward? And they said, No. And the reason why is because they didn't know how many people with ALS have a TBK1 gene. So what we're able to do with this data is two things. Number one, we can find out if there are any clinical trials that are coming up for that gene mutation. And number two, we can work with the company to move forward a treatment much faster by saying to them, we know how many patients have this gene. You have to move forward this treatment because there is a need for it and a market for it. And we've seen that with tofersen, and we want to make that real for even more people.
I love that. We did get a question, and it may be a question that we saved for Eric, but I'll just kind of forewarn it and throw it out to you, Eric, now. Eric, they're asking when FTD will be added to Synapticure's platform of what they're handling. So you may want to answer that when you do your presentation. And that looks like the only questions that have come up about this part of the presentation. So
Great.
Eric?
Yeah, Eric, over to you.
Great. Well, I can answer that question as well. So FTD is certainly on our roadmap, along with cognitive services, and that is something that we are planning on trying to break into next year, so during 2023. So I just wanted to introduce myself briefly, first of all. So I'm Eric Anderson. I'm the VP of Clinical Ops and Care Delivery for Synapticure. I'm a neurologist by training, and I've spent more than the last decade working in the telemedicine space, building programs, designing workflows, clinical teams, and so have a lot of experience there. I'm very passionate about redefining the healthcare system so that it works in the interest of the patient as opposed to the system. And it's something that I feel very passionate about, having a medically complex child. I will say that that's probably my life goal, and I'm very excited to be here as part of the Synapticure mission. Just to give a little bit more of an intro to Synapticure, and I appreciate what Sandra has already said, but the healthcare system as it currently stands in the status quo is very difficult. It's very noisy, especially for people with complicated diseases, ALS notwithstanding. We have different doctors, different clinics, therapists, hospitals, and they don't talk to each other very well. And a lot of the burden and onus of coordinating all this care tends to fall to patients. And what Synapticure is at its core is it's a more holistic platform that kind of brings all of this together so that we can coordinate all of that for people and for patients. We can work with your medical team. We can work with your current physician and other care members so that you don't have to be the one chasing down all of these leads, and that we can try to facilitate the care that happens. And part of the philosophy is that if the care team, us being part of it, are all working together and in unison, then it's just better for patients. It's better for everybody and more people win. And so what we're going to be talking about tonight is a couple of things. So number one, in working with existing care teams and everyone else, we add to that holistic part of what we provide: our insurance navigation, genetic counseling, physician care, nurses, licensed clinical social workers. It goes on, and as we continue to grow and expand, we just continue to include other things that that will become part of that holistic vision, and that includes remote patient monitoring, which I'll talk about more later. But right now, what I'd like to do is introduce a couple people from our team. First, I'll introduce Danielle Giraldi Samara, who is our Chief of Neuromuscular Services at Synapticure, and then also Erin, who has already gotten a wonderful introduction as being one of our care coordinators, and a wonderful one at that. And so, Danielle, why don't you take it away first?
Sure. Thanks, Eric. Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Samara, and I am a neurologist and fellowship-trained neuromuscular specialist, and I hail from New York. And I'll just give you a little bit about my background and how I became involved in this space. So very early on, very shortly after my fellowship, I was working in a smaller community-based hospital in Brooklyn, New York. And I had a consult in the emergency room for a pinched nerve. And very shortly after I saw this patient, I realized that it was not in fact that, and that it was very suspicious for ALS. So we had done most of the workup while the patient was in the hospital. However, when he was discharged and went home, I came to find that he could not follow up with me because he was uninsured, and then by this point had limitations in his mobility. And so I said, no way is this, going to happen. And so my system at the time did not allow for house calls. And so what I had done was I had called up my friend who was also my medical assistant, and we jumped in the car and we paid a quote unquote friendly visit to this gentleman, and we did house calls. And this was very surprising to me and eye-opening. So living in New York City, I never realized that there would be such a lack of access to care, but it was very real and now staring me in the face. And we continued to make house calls until I was able to arrange for social work to navigate through insurance issues so that he could come to see us in clinic. And because of this, this was the impetus behind my next step. And so for the next 5 years or so, I worked to build 2 community-based small ALS clinics in my local areas, one in South Brooklyn, New York, and the other in Staten Island. And after that, really, it was the natural progression, especially after the pandemic, to say, well, hey, look at this, look at these barriers to access of care. How can telehealth play into this? So, if one good thing came out of this, well, it's, the telemedicine platforms. And it only seemed natural to me that the next step in my career should be to join an amazing organization like Synapticure. And I can tell you that I have been practicing for over 15 years now, and this has been the best career move by far. And it's my privilege and honor to be a part of the team. And so with that, I will turn it over to Erin.
Thank you. I'm Erin Sanders. I'm a care coordinator here at Synapticure. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And really, I'm just one part of a fantastic team of social workers, nurses, medical assistants, genetic counselors, insurance navigator, who really just try to do our best to help patients navigate the system and just be there for support. My professional history is working with hospice and palliative care for about over 12 years. Really enjoyed doing that, but along the process really felt like the patient focus was missing, and I really desired to get back into that realm of medical social work, and had the opportunity to come work with SynaptCure and find that it is patient driven, it's patient focused. Our goal is to provide services that the patients need, which is hard to find in the medical world. And so I just feel very fortunate to be part of this team and to meet fantastic patients and families and just be there to support them, which I'm excited to introduce Alexis. And I am fortunate to be her and her brother and family's care coordinator, along with Dr. Geraldi Samara, who is their neurologist.
Hi everyone, I'm Alexis. Sorry, I have a puppy in the background, so if you hear the barking, apologies in advance. My brother, Aaron and Daniel just said, certainly he's a patient and he's with SynaptCure. He was diagnosed about 6 months ago now, back in May, and as Aaron said, she's his care coordinator. She is amazing, like above and beyond. And Danielle is his neurologist for SynaptCure, also amazing. And just wanted to kind of give you guys a little bit of background of sort of my story as well. My brother, like I said, he was diagnosed in May of this year. And then my father passed away from ALS about 2 years ago. And then our mother was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer shortly right after my dad passed. And she had a stroke about 2 years ago and passed away last month. So it's just my brother and I. And I just, SynaptCure and Aaron and Danielle and everyone involved they've been a lifeline for us. They've been just resource and comfort. And I don't think we could be in this without them. So I want to say thank you to you guys. And then also kind of wanted to give you a little bit of just an idea of some of the things they've done for us and they've done for my brother. I know Erin doesn't, like to brag about herself, but she's amazing. So my brother was diagnosed on May 6th, and within under 3 weeks, she got him into MGH. So he is a patient at MGH with Dr. Berry, and she just expedited that process in a way that I didn't know was possible. So that was, phenomenal. And I just, Danielle and Erin, everyone, they don't, like Sandra said, they don't take the place of, his MGH team, but they really work in coordination, and they're just this added layer that, the communication is, I don't even know how to explain it. We could send a text message, we can send an email, we can give a call, and we get, an efficient and expedited response, like within 24 hours. Erin has this great, like, out of office message that pops up that, she'll respond to you. And then like 20 minutes later, you might get a response or, something very reasonable. But they have been, my brother moved to an apartment and he needed ADA paperwork filled out, and Danielle had it filled out within 24 hours. He was, very quick to enroll for Relyvrio. And I just, found out last night he was the first patient that SynaptCure had completed, which, it's just that's phenomenal. He's had appointments where he's needed a chest x-ray and he needed, a script so he could go in immediately. And instead of going through Dr. Berry and MGH that may have taken a day or two through no fault of anyone's, we were able to get it, within an hour. I think just the level of communication and expedition that SynaptCure has provided, I don't know where we'd be without them.
That's an amazing story, Alexis. And I know when we were talking before, one of the things that you shared with me is that because it's just you and your brother, that how has SynaptCure played a role for you in kind of holding your hand during that process?
I mean, I think about the times where, there is a family history of ALS, but it isn't something that I've really experienced firsthand myself. And I have not known the resources to go to or the questions to ask. And just as things arise, whether it's Erin or Danielle or really, anyone at the entire team, it's like they've led us to the resources. They've done the research. They've just, they've asked the questions that I didn't know to ask. And I just that's so comforting because you don't know what you don't know.
You get really overwhelmed when you're first diagnosed just with the disease itself, right?
I think, like
Yeah.
overwhelmed is a good way of putting it. And like, I'm a very, organized person, and I like all the information I can have. And I think, there's times I would like email Erin and be like, hey, we need a resource because, we need a therapy recommendation, or we need someone who Medicare covers, or honestly, they guided us through the entire process of Social Security and Medicare, which, I'm 38. That's brand new for me. So to have somebody hold my hand through that was phenomenal.
Yeah, some powerful stories. I know everybody on the call is really appreciative of you being transparent and sharing your brother's experience and how Synapticare's walked with you on this journey. And I think coming from the patient side and the community that I work with, that's what I hear over and over again for the people on this call, is that Synapticare is my partner. I feel like the team at Synapticare cares about what's happening to me, and they're there for anything that I need, whether it's durable medical equipment, whether you were just talking about getting insurance, and that the neurologists are responding as if this was back in the days when you could just walk into your doctor's office and they're there to respond to you right away. So kudos to all of you. There's a couple questions that have come in the chat that I wanted to just raise. So one of the people who is a carrier of one of the genetic mutations asked, what do pre-symptomatic services look like at Synapticare?
Okay, so I can take that. So pre-symptomatic genetic services. So if you are a pre-symptomatic carrier of a pathogenic gene, you are able to enroll with us at Synapticare. I have had the experience working with Brooke, our genetic counselor, where we have also welcomed patients who have had variants of uncertain significance, pre-symptomatic, where she felt that a little bit of a red flag was raised with this particular variant, and there was some literature that had her concerned. And we also brought that patient in as well. So what do we do for pre-symptomatic patients? And what would be the reason behind enrolling? So I think one of the main reasons is to stay at the forefront. So research, particularly genetic research in relation to ALS, changes so rapidly. So while we may not have a trial that's open for your specific mutation at this time, well, tomorrow or next week, we may have it. And so we as neurologists stay up and at the forefront on these new trials, so that when they do become available, you'll be right there, and we can offer it to you. We can determine if you're eligible. We can work with you to see if you can be enrolled. The other reason why we would follow a pre-symptomatic patient is similar to why I would follow a pre-symptomatic gene carrier in a brick and mortar clinic. So if someone came to me in the office and they had a normal exam, a normal EMG, but were a gene carrier of a pathogenic mutation, I would say I wouldn't send them away. I would say, don't lose touch with me and follow up in 6 months. And the reason for this is so that I can keep an eye on those subtle parts of the exam that may change when a patient may not recognize it. So there are things that I can see that a patient might not be able to feel when they're crossing that threshold from pre-symptomatic to symptomatic. And so it's always a good idea to be in contact and plugged in with a neurologist.
There's a follow-up question to that. I'm going to jump down because one of the people asked, so now you mentioned, Sandra, neurofilament light levels. And so is Synapticare's neurology team, are Eric and Danielle, are you guys ordering NFL level tests, and what's Synapticare doing with that?
Yeah, so I think that this is part of the beauty of being a healthcare company that was designed by someone living with ALS and a caregiver, because as all these therapies were going through clinical trials, and Brian and I were noticing that while it wasn't an FDA validated biomarker, if neurofilament light is good enough for Biogen, it's good enough for Brian and Sandra, right? You as a family want that same information, because we are really on the cusp of so many new therapies. And in order for us all to beat that clock in this race against time, we need as much information as possible as families living with ALS. And so Brian and I felt like it would be incredibly powerful for families living with ALS to know their neurofilament light levels alongside a few other biomarkers that are being utilized in these drug studies for clinical trials. Now, what Synapticure was able to do was submit an IRB, and we have a initial.
Let me just interrupt, because a lot of
Yeah.
people don't know what IRBs are. So
Yes. It's a researchy thing. But
I love it.
I think that the key is we undertook a formal process and we put a lot of effort and a lot of heart and soul, which is Sandra's emo way of explaining what this looked like, to make sure that patients could get access to their neurofilament light levels with the support of a clinician, explaining the significance of it, so that it's not just random information you get in your inbox. It's really presented to you by a physician, and you're guided through potential significance of it. And yes, it's technically IRB stands for Institutional Review Board. So the gist of this is just one very concrete example of something that we want to move from pilot phase at Synapticure to offering to as many patients as possible. And I would say, whether it's the biomarker work we're doing in pilot phase, or in just a few minutes, you're going to hear Eric talk about another pilot that we're doing with remote patient monitoring. The most important thing is for families to enroll now, so that you are an enrolled Synapticure patient, so that as soon as each of those pilots become more full-fledged services, you're already a part of our clinical not team. You're seen as a patient by Synapticure, and so you can be sort of first in line to receive those services. So just again, in summary, it's a small pilot now, but if it is something that interests you, it's best to enroll in Synapticure now, so you're at the front of the line once we're able to expand it to more patients.
And I know one of the things that impressed me was how nimble and quick Synapticure responds to new things. So if there's a new gene that's discovered, right away, it's added to what you guys are checking for. Does that also apply if there's a trial that is testing for a biomarker that comes up in a trial? Is that something that you're able to integrate into what you're looking at? So if it's a blood plasma biomarker, for example, that they're testing, are you able to look for that too?
Brian, do you want to speak to that?
So the answer is, we are able to modify. We are able to modify the biomarkers that we look at on a regular basis. So what we plan to do is that once we move from the pilot to the full program, we will add in additional biomarkers that are part of clinical trials or are investigational. So if we know if a patient, so that we know if a patient is a good fit for a new trial. And what we hope to do is to eliminate a need for
A waiting period, yeah, before you enroll in a trial.
by having a patient natural history all ready to go.
Yeah, so this is just to come back to the power of what we can do with patient data for patients, right? So to Brian's point, now if you enroll in a clinical trial, there may be a waiting period, but if this data is already exists, we may be able to do away with that component. Again, the dream for so many of us ALS families is to live in a world where there is not a placebo group. That is a dream within reach if we get the right data together. We have a dream that the right data can help us better identify these subtypes. To your point, Michelle, if it's a subset of ALS patients with a specific biomarker, if it's a subset of patients with a certain mutation like Brian's that's rare, how do we quickly figure out what that data looks like across the country and give drug development companies the justification they need to take that thing off the shelf and get it through the FDA process fast, so we have access to therapies that are effective. So that's just to really underscore the incredible power of this opportunity for all families living with this.
I love that. There was a comment in the chat, and it might be appropriate for you, Eric, as you go into the next section, where they said, let me scroll down here because I got it a little bit further up in the chat. They said, listen, when I go to my clinic, unfortunately, I don't feel my doctor actually cares for me. I see him for 15 minutes barely, and I'm almost on nonverbal. How does Synapticure interact with patients like me? And before you answer, I just want to tell you what somebody else typed in the chat box. They said Synapticure is the company that cares about you. Just Synapticure Care is the company that cares about you. So I thought that was really special.
Yeah, that's great. Danielle, I think this one is, I'll defer to our neuromuscular service line director.
Sure. So for patients that have severe dysarthria or trouble speaking or anorthria, who cannot speak at all, we do take the time during the visit to work with you in the best way that we can, whether that be through eye gaze device, whiteboard, having our patients write things down and the caregiver speaking on the patient's behalf. You'll never be rushed out of a visit with me. So however long it takes for you to express your concerns, to ask your questions, that's what I'm going to give you. Before the visit, we compile records, we do chart review. So I will have a sense of who you are, your diagnostic journey, your treatment journey before the visit even starts. So that is something that I find very important in making these visits as seamless as possible for me and for you. So, I hope that answers your question. We will, and I speak for myself and for the team, will exhaust every means possible to facilitate communication that may be difficult for you.
Great. Thank you. So I think, Eric, the next question that came up turns it over to your section anyway, when they said, how do I enroll with Synapticure? This sounds like an amazing model. So it's a great segue to you to talk about your new RPM program and how people would sign up if they're interested.
But one thing before, Eric, you go, I just want to take a moment to say thank you to Alexis. I know how hard it is to share your journey, but it's also so important. so that we all understand that we are really and truly in this together, and we do not have to walk alone. So thank you, Alexis.
And thank you for giving me this opportunity to share, because I mean, SnapToCure, like they're the team that cares. Like I can't even describe it. Like it's so true.
And with that, Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just I have to compose myself for a minute, but I'm very happy. So yeah, so to answer the question first that had come through, this is our website here. So it's just www.synaptocure.com, and registration is pretty straightforward and easy for folks. You just register here and it brings you to a sign up page, and we will connect with you once we get your enrollment. So moving on to remote patient monitoring, which is something that I'll cover a little quickly here, just in the interest of time, since we are running out. But as I mentioned before, this is part of a more holistic model in bringing care basically across the continuum. And we call this RPM, remote patient monitoring. And so the idea behind it is basically that the way that it exists in the current state of things, or the status quo, is that your medical care is sporadic. Your physician, your care team are often only thinking about you while you're in the appointment, and that's not the way that it should be. We believe that chronic care should be more continuous, that care continues outside of the clinic walls, outside of the hospital walls. And the idea is that connected devices at home can help us fill that gap so that we can keep an eye on folks, understand where they're going with their progression, and what we can do to help or intervene along the way. So one of the things that we have started looking into right now is vital capacity. And this is monitored by spirometry, or remote spirometry type device. And so the current state, the way that it currently exists, is that your forced vital capacity is measured and monitored in person during your clinic visits, usually during a multidisciplinary clinic visit, 2 to 3 times a year. And then once they have that information, decisions are then made based on the result, usually in terms of ventilation, ventilation support, non-invasive ventilation, et cetera. What we understand in the current literature is that non-invasive ventilation can prolong the transition to mechanical ventilation. It's something that, if started earlier, can help prevent decline. And so some of this is based on—
Eric, can I interrupt and ask something real quick? Because there's a lot of new people. They may not know the difference between non-invasive ventilation. So if you can kind of just, because they may not have heard that before in their journey yet.
Yeah, so non-invasive ventilation are things like BiPAP or forced respiratory support, where it's not invasive, meaning it's not invading your body like a trach or a ventilator machine would be. So non-invasive ventilation would be one that doesn't require any tubes or anything coming into you. I think is a very simple way to put it. And so, yeah, so the idea is that if we put non-invasive ventilation on sooner, that it can prolong, it can prevent decline and prolong the time when someone would require mechanical ventilation. And that ends up improving quality of life overall, not having to go into that step earlier. This has been tried. People have tried using non-invasive ventilation earlier in ALS, found that patients for the most part tolerated it quite well. But a lot of these studies, unfortunately, didn't have enough people in them recruited to be able to force changes in the way that medical practice is currently practiced. So our hypothesis is that by continuously measuring a patient's vital capacity at home, not just at those sporadic visits throughout time, if we can become partners and do that throughout time, we'll have more data points and can detect very slight changes where non-invasive ventilation could be instituted earlier and prolong time to mechanical ventilation and improve overall quality of life. So that's something that we've been working on. We do have a pilot currently going, and we're going to be reviewing that data when the pilot closes. And I know that we have had some people reach out to us wanting to be involved in this or the next iteration of this when this comes out. But basically it involves a small device that's connected to a smartphone. And the questions we're asking are, are these able to be used effectively by people with bulbar symptoms with the use of a mask or something like that, or a different modified mouthpiece? Are the results generalizable? In other words, are the results we get able to be applied to all of the patients we see or just to certain populations? And are the results actionable? Are these things where we can indeed come in and make changes and change people's outcomes and help them live a life that's longer and without mechanical ventilation earlier? So
Yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I wanted to echo everything that Eric just shared from a caregiver's perspective with Brian's journey. I mean, I think about how amazing it would have or could have been if we could have tested Brian's breathing capacity on our own at home with that virtual support on a really regular basis, and had a doctor see that data come in really, every couple weeks, every month. And I think the power of that is just what Eric said, which is if a doctor reads that data that they're receiving continuously, they can say, hey, you know what? I think that getting on a BiPAP early on in your journey, just based on what I'm seeing with these scores coming through, is a prudent measure, a prudent step. Let's be proactive with your care. And you know what? The data shows that if you get on a BiPAP early, you could delay the time until trach. And that's, just what Eric's saying. I mean, it's just the more care you get, the more frequent your visits are with both a physician and a care coordinator, the more touch points you have, the more your care team can intervene and be proactive on your behalf and improve your comfort level, your longevity, all of the things that we are all fighting for every day. So I wanted to kind of underscore just what Eric shared from being the spouse of someone living with this illness for the last 5 years.
I appreciate that. And that is the common theme with the remote patient monitoring idea, is that the idea is that we can intervene and change your outcome with these devices. The next topic we have is weight. And so with this, it's a similar type of idea. We'll have remote scales, because right now patients are weighed at 2 to 3 times a year at their appointments, and decisions around nutrition are made. So that basically means, wow, compared to the last time you came in for a visit, your weight is drastically lower, and now we're going to take action. But if we were monitoring that incrementally throughout time, we could have probably intervened a lot sooner than just when you came in and then and it was noticed. And so we know that the decline in weight is usually associated with decreased PO intake, decreased eating food, often due to difficulty swallowing. There's been, of course, studies on this as well. We know that there's a prognostic value that's associated with weight loss in ALS. We also know that there have been studies showing that high calorie feeding can slow progression. So why not figure out if this is happening sooner, right? Why wait for 2, 3, 6 months until it's determined later at a clinic visit? So again, our hypothesis here is that by monitoring weight continuously, we'll be able to detect those sharper declines or those, changes in slope and intervene much sooner with nutrition support and speech therapy evaluations. Our last one is pretty straightforward, and this just has to do with gait and falls. So again, current state, every 3 to 6 months at the regular clinical visits, You're assessed by physical therapy, try to determine if there are needs for ambulatory devices, things like that. If we could use and gait difficulty is of course associated with falls. And if we can continuously monitor gait patterns and see that someone is starting to sway to one side, lean to one side, having increasing difficulty or weakness, that's exemplified by gait assessment, then we could potentially intervene sooner, prevent falls, prevent what we would consider to be unnecessary visits to the emergency room because of it. And so overall, for all of the things that we're looking at right now, we've picked the topics that we feel are the most actionable and the most relevant to ALS and the patients we serve. And this is something that's going to be part of our holistic model. And so again, what I would say is that, and I know that we do have some patients who are interested in these and have reached out to us, and my recommendation would be that if you are interested in any of these things that we are going to be rolling out, I would encourage you to enroll now, so that the time frame between enrollment and when these come out, that you're already there and ready to go when they become live. And so just, I guess, to close on that, I'll just share again the website, which is www.synapticure.com. And you just register up in the right-hand corner where it says register now, and we'll be happy to serve you. And Michelle, I'll open it for any questions or comments, or
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple questions came in. So one person, and I've actually had this question raised to me several other times as well, besides on tonight's call. There are so many people outside of the US who are so envious of what Synapticure is doing, and they know that that their insurance, obviously from their country, wouldn't cover this. Are they able to pay a direct pay to see a Synapticure neurologist?
This was from where again, did you say?
Well, this particular person is from Romania, but I've had other questions from somebody in Canada. I've had people from South America where they just don't have the ALS centers of excellence. So it's even less care there than we have in some of the rural communities. And they said, can we pay to have Synapticure's neurologist help us?
Yeah, so this is an issue. I would say that we get this question. There are times we get this question several times a week, but we get this question regularly from folks outside of the country who are looking for services where they are, whether it's in Canada or other countries. And the fact of the matter is that unfortunately, due to the legal aspects of practicing medicine, the regulations that are required, it would not be legal for us to do that unless we were able to establish what that country considers to be the equivalent of their licensure or right to practice in their country.
Okay.
So that is something that is on our roadmap and something that we definitely want to do. But at the current moment, we are unable to practice medicine in another country, but we hope to conquer that in the future.
One of the other questions that came in is a real great follow-up for your RPM program. It says, I need help with breathing, but my doctor keeps telling me I don't need assistance at this time. How would Synapticure assess that and help me?
That's for you, Danielle.
Mute myself. If this were the case, what I would do, or what we could do, one of two things. First, we can expedite a referral to a pulmonologist. So if this is your neurologist telling you that you don't need any intervention at this point, but you feel like you are struggling, then my first thought would be to have a breathing specialist, a pulmonologist, evaluate you. And again, wait times to see specialists can be very prolonged, and our care team can help expedite those initial consultations. Another way that we would be able to intervene and help is to help expedite the implementation of respiratory therapy local to you, either local to your home in an outside facility, or to have a respiratory therapist come into your house to do formal spirometry or PFT. So basically, formal tests of breathing. And then, as Eric said, earlier intervention with non-invasive ventilation improves outcomes. So I do have many patients who have BiPAP in their home on standby. So they don't use the machine regularly, and they might not be, they might not need it throughout the night, or they may need it for 45 minutes, before they go to bed. And again, or not at all, but we have been able to work with patients' insurance companies and DME suppliers to obtain these devices to have on hand should the need arise.
I love that. I recently lost, unfortunately, one of my friends whose CO2 levels got out of control, and they lived in a rural community. They didn't go to doctors often. And so I think that got missed in part of this. What about the people who don't go to a neurologist and haven't seen a neurologist for a couple years? How does Synapticure help them?
Yeah, I can answer that. So Synapticure, as we mentioned before, is meant to be something additive and something where we interact with, existing care teams, other things like that. That being said, we do get patients who are in exactly that situation, who come to us. They don't have a physician, they don't have a neurologist or anything like that. What we tell patients is that it's not an ideal state to be like that. We're limited on everything that we can do, but we can still do a lot virtually. So we will never turn anyone away, and we will do everything in our power to help you and do what we can. But people just have to understand that because of that inability to have someone physically there, we can be limited at times in certain things. But like I said, we don't turn anybody away.
Yeah. And to build on that, one of the things we're so proud of and that just drives us every day is being of value to families all across that spectrum. So on one end of the spectrum, Alexis shared tonight how she's being seen with her family at a very, very top, incredible ALS clinic. And yet Synapticure there's a lot of room for us to be a part of that team and that care to support in partnership with MGH. And then you have all the way across that spectrum to the other end, where 25% of the patients that Synapticure is seeing right now have zero medical care. So to your question, about what if I haven't seen a neurologist or anyone in a long time, that is 25% of the patients we see. And what we do, as Eric said, is we wrap ourselves around every family just the same way. We figure out what they need. And one of the things we would do would be to identify a local provider who we would partner with so that you would have an on-the-ground provider and you would have Synapticure support. And so that's just like Danielle alluded to, when you need a pulmonologist, we're going to get you a pulmonologist and we're going to get you that appointment fast. If you need a local neurologist and you don't have one, we're also going to get you that local neurologist, and we're going to partner with them to provide your care. And so, that's very much the ethos. Why Brian and I started this, we just felt like there was an opportunity to add value for the whole spectrum of patients, everybody from those who are seen at the top ALS clinics to those who have completely left the care ecosystem. There are a lot of hugs to go around. We are ready to wrap ourselves around all the families in all the ways.
One of the people just commented as well. So this isn't necessarily a rural situation, but somebody commented that her husband is vented and trached, and for them, getting to a clinic is a near impossibility as well. And so I think we need to kind of mention that because there's a large population of people who are trached, and it's incredibly difficult to get to a clinic for the regular visit. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, again, that was a huge reason why we wanted to start Synapticure, because even, with Brian being relatively able to travel. I mean, I will say Brian got a 450-pound wheelchair today. So this is like his new race car. He's very excited about this new equipment, but Brian is absolutely wheelchair bound. Has, with myself and other professional caregiving support, around the clock caregiving. And yet, it's very difficult for us to travel. So we said, oh my God, if it is so hard for us to travel and we're not trached, oh my goodness, what is this nightmare like for families who are trached? And how can we come into your homes and help where you're at, get you what you need? And if there's something you need in person, let's figure out who can come to your home to get you that component if you aren't able to leave your home. We are creative, out of the box thinkers. I mean, Danielle shared her origin story in treating and supporting ALS families. It was literally, right, Danielle, this like, how do I think outside the box and just figure out how to make this better in any way I can? And that is truly the ethos of Erin and Danielle and Eric and everyone on the care team. We think outside the box. We do it with heart. Brian and I, we are advocates at heart, and we are here in this care platform advocating for the best medical support you can get.
I'll do another prop for Erin and the care team, because somebody who signed up with SynaptiCare almost immediately, they're homebound, trach, and you guys found a dentist to come to their home and help with dental care. So this isn't just about how do I get a prescription for Relyvrio, which you can do. And I think I heard you had 100% success rate so far, but it's also about how do I make my ALS care wraparound care? Like anything I need, from durable medical equipment to referrals, to off-label prescriptions, to finding me a dentist. I mean, I never would have thought of that, but wow. I mean, that made it, they hadn't seen a dentist for years, and the care team made that happen. So there's a question here. It's a little sensitive one. They said, so what if my doctor is opposed to me getting a new opinion?
So I'll take that one. The patient advocate in me is that you should definitely get a new doctor. But the answer is, sorry, but the better answer is that they should pick up the phone and call Danielle, and we can explain to them how we work with them. Because in every other disease area, patients have multiple doctors and they work together to help improve care for the patient. This is not a novel idea. It's what everyone else has, and we should have it too.
I love that answer. Everyone else has it, and we should have it too. Perfect. Let me just double check. I know we're getting a little bit long on time, but let me see if there's any other questions that have popped up that I missed. One of the things that they did ask is the other states. I know you're not in all 50 states yet. Can you just tell them the states you're not in yet and what you're doing to get licensed there?
Yeah, so I'll say that the paperwork is submitted to get licensure in the rest of the states. We're just waiting on the medical boards. Yeah, if let me see, I could share a map real quick. I just didn't have it handy right now, but I'll share a map in a minute to show everyone where we are at,
Okay.
where we're not.
And I think that given the fact that we are close to being in all states, I think it's worth enrolling, clicking the registration form, and then when you meet with the care coordination team, that way you've sort of like made a connection. And as soon as we finalize that paperwork, which to Eric's point is just around the corner, you'll find out immediately. I think that's the easiest way to just stay, at the front of the line.
Absolutely. There's so many people are raving. I could spend a half hour just reading you the comments in the comment box about people saying they love Synapticure. The care teams made a huge difference for them. They're going on and on of the people who have already created their care team with Synapticure. So this has been a huge deal. Like, you are beloved in this comment thread. And I know the community is so appreciative of everything you guys have done. So this is, if you will, a last call for any questions. If you want to ask them in the comments on Facebook, and we can ask those. But as we're waiting to see if there's any last ones that come in, I want to first honor Alexis again for sharing your family story so transparently and what it's meant to you. So all of us know that that's tough to do. And so we love you and embrace you for doing that to help other people. That's kind of the spirit of this community that made us all fall in love with the community. So first, thank you to you for that. But also, I guess, this wasn't planned, but I just want to thank Brian and Sandra for having the grit to disrupt the system and being willing to fix what's been broken, and to do it in partnership with so many of the great doctors around the country. So you didn't just go and upend the apple cart, if you will. You went in and said, let's fix this, let's work together, and let's make this a better system for everybody that's battling this disease. And that takes a lot of leadership, and it's taken a lot of time away from your personal life with you and Brian and all that you do already with IMALS. And so I think that gets forgotten a lot, that you're living the same life that everybody else is living with ALS, but you've basically tackled the whole monstrosity of this disease at the public policy level, now at the clinical care level, and you've done it with grace and with love for the community. So huge thank you for that.
Thank you, Michelle. And just to give everybody a sense of it, thank you for the love to the Synapticure care team. I have to say, the Synapticure care team loves you right back. I mean, I am so fortunate to be on these calls with Danielle and Eric and our other physicians and Aaron and the care coordination team, and the love that they have for the families they work for. I mean, it is deep, it is real, it is incredible, it is so energizing, and whatever, it's all worth it. It's so more than worth it. And so just know that any love you feel for the Synapticure team is 100-fold back at you all.
So I wanted to interject and just share the website one more time. So we do have a frequently asked questions section on the synapticure.com website. And there we do have, what states you serve. So we're currently serving 44 states for ALS. There's 6 states missing, but the majority are there, including, I believe, Alaska and Hawaii. Do we have Hawaii? We have Hawaii, right? Yes. So yeah, so there. Yeah, so all of the states are listed here, and then I thought there was a map. There's not a map right now, but that's where it is. So that's and there's lots of other great questions here too that commonly come up. So I would certainly encourage you to visit the website if there are other questions after this that we didn't answer that come to you later, and see if those are there.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll add as we close as well is clicking on the website is just for your opportunity to learn. So you'll find out if your insurance is covered with Wet Synapticure, if they take your insurance. You'll find out if they take your state. But clicking the website is just kind of the let me get started and learn about Synapticure, and seeing if it fits with your care model, and if that's something you want to explore. So check it out. Whenever anybody's newly diagnosed, they say, what do I do? First thing you need to do is get a hold of Synapticure. When somebody says, a family that had ALS, what do I do? I think you need to get a hold of Synapticure. I live a long way from everybody. What do I do? You need to get a hold of Synapticure. I can't get a hold of my doctor. What do I do? You need to get a hold of Synapticure. The answer's the same. So if you message me and you ask me, you can pretty much count on the fact that I'm going to say, get a hold of Synapticure. I can't find my wheelchair. It's been taken 8 months and they still haven't delivered it. What do I do? Get a hold of Synapticure. Literally, they are the problem solvers for everything that's going on in your area ALS care model. So thank you guys so much in the audience, for everybody for joining us. And I'm just going to let you, Brian and Sandra, say goodnight to everyone.
Sandra, after you.
Well, thank you. to you, Michelle, for hosting us and for being a tireless advocate of all things ALS 24/7. You are a lifeline to so many of us, including Brian and I personally. And so thank you for bringing this community together tonight. Thank you to everybody for joining. We hope it was helpful. And again, like any other outstanding questions you have, clicking the enrollment or registration button is only an invitation to learn more. As Danielle and Erin said, we have all the time in the world for you. So if you just want to take an hour to understand the care model more, we're here for that. All you have to do is let us know that you want to chat.
And I will add one last thing. The reason why we've poured our time into this is because it's because we know we can all have better care. And we deserve the best care possible to fight this effing disease.
No better way to close this, right? Thank you so much, everybody. Brian, Sandra, Eric, Danielle, Alexis, Erin. I think I got everybody. And for all of you that joined us in the audience tonight, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you about Synapticure. And personally, I just hope you have a time to check them out. Everybody, literally every single person I've ever known that is enrolled with Synapticure is so grateful for what they've done for them. So check them out. Night, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a blessed evening.
Thank you.